It was a quiet evening when the protagonist first saw her. The streets of the small town were deserted, the only sound being the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. He was walking home from work, his thoughts preoccupied with the usual concerns of everyday life, bills, work deadlines, and the things he hadn't yet done. It was a life that seemed ordinary, too ordinary at times. But that evening, something changed. At first, he thought he had imagined it. A figure stood under a street lamp, silhouetted against the dim light. But then, as he approached, he could see more clearly. A woman, though she didn't look quite like anyone he had ever seen. She was tall, with skin that shimmered like it, was made of something other than flesh. Her eyes, large and dark, gleamed like twin pools of deep space, yet there was a strange sadness to them. Her clothes, if they could be called that, were made from some kind of shimmering material that reflected the street lamp's glow in a way that didn't seem quite right. It wasn't human, not at all. The protagonist's heart skipped a beat, but he did what he always did in unexpected situations. He stayed calm. He couldn't help but stare, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. She stood still, as if waiting for something, or someone. Her presence felt otherworldly, as if she didn't belong in this place. Maybe she was lost, he thought, though the possibility of an alien being lost in his small town seemed ridiculous. But the longer he looked, the more convinced he became that this woman wasn't just a person. She wasn't from here. He could feel it in the air, a sense of wrongness that couldn't be explained. It was then that she made a small movement, and the protagonist froze. She took a slow step forward, her eyes never leaving him. For a moment he thought she might say something, but she didn't. She only stood there, her gaze so intense that it felt like she was peering directly into his soul. And then, before he could react, she collapsed. His instincts kicked in immediately. He rushed forward, barely able to register what was happening before he was kneeling beside her, gently supporting her head. Her skin felt cool, like marble, and her breathing was shallow, labored. He was no doctor, but he knew something was wrong. She was hurt, badly it seemed. The protagonist didn't think twice. He didn't question why or how she had appeared on his street. All he knew was that someone needed help, and he was the only one around. With a surge of adrenaline, he lifted her carefully, keeping her head cradled against his chest. She was light, almost weightless, but her presence felt heavy in a way he couldn't describe. It was as if the world itself was pressing down on him, making the air thick with tension. He made his way toward his house, his mind racing with thoughts and questions. Where had she come from? What was she doing here? And most importantly, who or what was she? He didn't know how he managed to get her inside, but when he did, he laid her on the couch, careful not to hurt her further. The protagonist went into a frantic search for anything that could help her, trying to keep his mind from spiraling into panic. He didn't know what kind of injuries she had, but it was clear she needed medical attention. His house was modest, simple. Nothing in it seemed extraordinary, yet now everything felt out of place. The alien presence in the room seemed to make even the mundane objects feel strange. As he searched his cabinets for bandages, a chill ran down his spine. He could sense that something beyond the ordinary was unfolding before him. The woman, however, didn't seem to need medical supplies. As he stood there trying to gather his thoughts, she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment the protagonist's heart caught in his throat. Those eyes. They weren't like any eyes he had ever seen before. They were dark and deep, filled with an almost infinite sadness, yet there was also an intensity that made his chest tighten. She blinked slowly, focusing on him. For a long moment neither of them spoke. There was no need for words. The silence between them was thick, as if it was charged with an energy neither of them understood. He didn't know what to say, and she seemed equally uncertain. But the connection was undeniable. Her lips parted as if she was going to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, she reached out a trembling hand, and the protagonist instinctively took it. Her skin was cool, but her touch felt gentle, almost comforting. As she tried to sit up, she winced, a sharp breath escaping her. The protagonist helped her, supporting her as she moved, trying his best to offer comfort, though he had no idea how. What could he possibly say to someone like her? And yet somehow, it didn't matter. In that moment, the world outside his house didn't exist. There was only him, the alien woman, and the unspoken understanding that she needed help, and he would be the one to give it. He tried to communicate with her, asking if she was all right, but she didn't seem to understand. She simply nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. Despite the confusion, the protagonist felt a strange sense of calm. It was as though, for reasons unknown to him, he was meant to be here with her. The night wore on, and the protagonist stayed by her side. He watched her as she rested, her breathing steadying, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was at play. He didn't know who or what she was, but he knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same. And as the night deepened, he could only wonder what had brought this strange woman to his doorstep, and what would happen next. The next morning, the alien woman awoke in the comfort of the protagonist's modest living room. The first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. The protagonist had barely slept, watching over her as she rested. He wasn't sure why, but there was an overwhelming sense of responsibility to protect her. The whole situation felt surreal, like something out of a dream. But everything about her, her presence, her eyes, felt real. She stirred as the sunlight touched her face, and for a moment, the protagonist just watched her, unsure of what to do next. Her features were still strange to him, though they had become more familiar in the hours they had spent together. The way her eyes seemed to hold so much depth, the way her movements were both graceful and deliberate, made her seem like someone who belonged to another world, someone who had experienced things he couldn't even begin to imagine. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from the injury she had sustained, but she didn't seem as weak as she had the night before. There was a quiet strength to her that the protagonist couldn't ignore. He offered her some water, and she accepted it with a nod, taking small sips as if she was savoring the moment. The protagonist took a seat across from her, his mind racing. What was he supposed to do now? He had no idea where she came from, how she had ended up here, or why she had chosen to trust him. He had helped her out of a sense of decency, but now that she was awake and seemingly in better shape, he realized that his actions might have set something in motion, something bigger than he could ever have imagined. As the silence stretched on, the alien woman finally looked up from her cup, meeting his gaze. She said nothing at first, but the intensity of her stare spoke volumes. It was as if she was trying to communicate something without using words. The protagonist felt a strange pull, as though she was trying to tell him something important, but he couldn't understand. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice breaking the silence. She nodded slightly, but it was clear that words weren't enough to explain what had happened. She didn't speak, and the protagonist wondered if she even could. The thought crossed his mind that maybe she didn't have a way to communicate in the same way humans did. But then again, everything about her was a mystery. As the morning passed, the protagonist prepared breakfast, unsure of what to say or how to act. He had never found himself in a situation like this before. An alien woman, injured, confused, and alone, had appeared in his life, and he had no idea what to do next. It was both exciting and terrifying at the same time. But something told him that helping her wasn't just a matter of kindness, it was something he was meant to do. The alien woman remained quiet, her eyes scanning the room as if taking in every detail. She seemed to be observing him, studying his movements as he cooked. The protagonist couldn't help but feel a little self-conscious under her gaze. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was more than just a stranger. There was something familiar about her, something that tugged at his subconscious. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, or the way she seemed to trust him without hesitation. After breakfast, the protagonist helped her to her feet, and she looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. Her body still appeared fragile, but there was a sense of resolve in her eyes that made him think she would be fine in no time. She was a survivor. "I'll help you," the protagonist said softly, unsure of what he was offering exactly. It felt like an empty promise, but it was the only thing he could say. She didn't respond, but she gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was enough. It was as if she understood that he was doing his best, even if he didn't have all the answers. As the day went on, the alien woman seemed to regain some of her strength. She moved around the house, slowly at first, but with more confidence as time passed. It was then that the protagonist noticed something odd. She was beginning to glow, not in an overt magical sense, but more like a soft internal light radiating from her skin. It was subtle, almost like the shimmer of stardust beneath the surface of her body. The glow wasn't blinding or harsh, but it was enough to make the protagonist stop and stare. He wondered if it was a sign of her healing process or something. Entirely different, he couldn't be sure. But what he did know was that this was no ordinary woman. She wasn't just from another place. She was something else entirely. As evening approached, the alien woman seemed to grow restless. She paced the room, as if something was weighing heavily on her mind. The protagonist noticed her anxious movements and asked if there was anything he could do to help. She didn't respond, but he could sense her unease. It was clear she wasn't comfortable staying in one place for too long. Suddenly she stopped, her gaze fixed on the door. There was a strange intensity in her eyes, and the protagonist felt a shiver run down his spine. It was as though she had heard something or seen something that he couldn't. He followed her gaze but saw nothing unusual. The house was quiet, still, save for the sound of his own breathing. For a moment he thought she might be ready to leave. Maybe she was just waiting for the right moment to go. But then she turned back to him, and there was something in her expression that made him pause. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. She reached into the small bag she carried and pulled out a metallic object. It wasn't much. Just a small, circular piece of something that looked like a combination of metal and crystal. It shimmered in the light, its surface smooth and cool to the touch. She held it out to the protagonist, her silent gesture speaking volumes. He took the object from her, unsure of what to make of it. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The alien woman didn't speak, but her eyes told him everything. This wasn't just a gift. It was a message. And, whatever that message was, it was something that would change everything. The days that followed were a blur of strange thoughts, unanswered questions, and a constant feeling of something impending. The protagonist couldn't shake the feeling that the alien woman had brought something with her, something far more important than just her presence. The small metallic object she had given him was tucked away in a drawer, its surface shimmering with an odd, quiet light whenever the light hit it just right. He had no idea what it was or what it meant, but he couldn't help but feel that it held the key to something bigger. Each day, the alien woman grew stronger. She had become more comfortable in his home, moving around with more ease, though her every action still seemed filled with purpose. She had a quiet, almost solemn demeanor, as though she carried a weight on her shoulders that she wasn't ready to share. It was evident that she wasn't the type to speak much, and the protagonist had long learned to read her silent language. The way she tilted her head when something piqued her interest, the way her eyes narrowed when she was deep in thought. It was all he had to go on. He began to notice other things as well. She seemed to be more aware of the world around her than he first thought. She could recognize the sound of a passing car, the rustling of leaves in the wind, and even the distant hum of traffic. It was as if her senses were finely tuned, as if she was constantly absorbing everything around her, all the while remaining calm and collected. She never seemed startled by anything, but always observant, almost as if she was waiting for something, waiting for the right moment to act. The protagonist tried to go about his usual routine, but it was hard to focus on anything for long. His thoughts were always drifting back to the alien woman, to the questions that had been eating at him since she had arrived. Who was she? Why was she here? And why had she chosen to trust him? He had tried to ask her these questions directly, but each time she had either looked away or given him a vague answer that left him more confused than before. It was clear that she wasn't ready to reveal everything, not yet. The trust she had placed in him was evident, but there was still so much she kept hidden. Days turned into nights, and the protagonist found himself growing increasingly restless. He could no longer shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. He began to research the object she had given him, hoping that it might hold the answers he so desperately sought. But no matter how many articles, books, or websites he searched through, nothing came close to explaining what it was. The metal had a strange, almost otherworldly quality to it, unlike anything he had ever seen. It was smooth and cold, yet warm, to the touch, and the crystal-like glow it emitted was unlike anything he had ever encountered. As he sat at his desk one evening, staring at the object in his hand, the alien woman appeared beside him, silently watching him as he examined it. Her presence was always quiet, but it carried a weight that seemed to fill the room. She stood there for a long moment, her gaze never leaving him. The protagonist felt the familiar pull in his chest, as if she was trying to communicate something important, something he couldn't quite grasp. "Is this from your home?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost unsure. He was asking more to himself than to her, hoping that somehow she would understand his confusion. She nodded slowly, her eyes flickering toward the object in his hand. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a faint sadness in her gaze, as if the object carried a burden. The protagonist felt a pang in his chest as he realized that whatever this was, it wasn't just a gift. It was a part of her world, a piece of something she had left behind. The alien woman stepped closer, her fingers lightly grazing the edge of the object. Her touch was soft, and the protagonist could feel a warmth radiating from her skin as she reached out. She didn't speak, but the intensity of her gaze said more than words ever could. For the first time, the protagonist understood that this wasn't just about helping her anymore. It was about something much bigger. She had come to him for a reason. But what was that reason? And what would happen when the answers finally came? The next few days were marked by an uneasy quiet. The alien woman seemed to retreat into herself, lost in her thoughts. The protagonist gave her space, but he couldn't help but notice the tension building between them. It was as if there was something unsaid, something important that she wasn't ready to share. He began to feel the weight of the silence pressing down on him, and he wondered if he had done something wrong. Maybe she didn't trust him after all. Maybe she was waiting for something that he couldn't give her. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky outside turned a soft shade of purple, the alien woman made a move. She had been standing by the window, her back to him, but now she turned slowly, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. It was as if she had finally made a decision, and she was ready to share it with him. She reached into her bag and pulled out another object, this one different from the first. It was a small, glowing sphere, its surface pulsating gently with light. It reminded the protagonist of a star, small and fragile, yet burning with a power that seemed to radiate from deep within. She held it out to him, her expression serious. Hesitated, unsure of what to do. The first object had been strange enough, but this was something else entirely. He took a deep breath and reached for the sphere, feeling its warmth against his palm. As soon as his fingers touched it, a strange sensation flooded through him, like a rush of energy coursing through his veins, filling him with a sudden clarity. The alien woman watched him closely, her eyes unwavering. The glow of the sphere seemed to intensify as if responding to his touch. He could feel it. This was it. This was the answer, the moment that would change everything. The protagonist didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing, for sure. Whatever path he was about to walk down, it would lead him somewhere far beyond the ordinary. The days that followed were filled with questions, unanswered thoughts, and a growing feeling of unease. The protagonist couldn't stop thinking about the glowing sphere the alien woman had given him. There was something undeniably powerful about it. He could feel its presence even when it wasn't in his hand. It was as if the object itself was alive, its energy wrapping around him, nudging him toward something unknown. The protagonist tried to go on with his life, but it was impossible to ignore the constant pull of the mysterious sphere. He spent hours researching, trying to figure out what it was, where it came from, and what purpose it served. But no matter how much he searched, he found no answers. He even reached out to experts, scientists, and even his closest friends. But no one could offer an explanation. Then one evening, as the sun set and the sky turned dark, something changed. The quiet hum of the evening was broken by a knock at the door. The protagonist's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't expecting anyone, and his mind instantly went to the alien woman. Had she come back? Was she ready to explain everything? He opened the door cautiously, half expecting to see her standing there, but instead he was greeted by an empty street. No sign of her. But then as he stepped outside, he saw something on the ground, something small, metallic, and familiar. It was the first object she had given him, the one that had started it all. It was lying there, almost as if it had been waiting for him. He picked it up and felt a familiar pulse of energy rush through his body. It was warm now, almost as if it was alive. But why had she left it here? What was she trying to tell him? Just as he stood there trying to make sense of it, he felt a presence behind him. He turned, and there she was, the alien woman. She was standing just a few feet away, looking as beautiful and mysterious as ever. But there was something different about her now. Her energy was more powerful, more commanding. She was no longer the fragile woman he had first found. "I returned," she said, her voice quiet but steady. There was a hint of something in her tone, something deep and heavy. "And now, you must decide." The protagonist stood frozen for a moment, not sure how to react. He had spent so much time thinking about her, trying to figure out who she was, and now she was here again with even more questions than before. "Decide?" he repeated, his voice hoarse with uncertainty. "Decide what?" She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "The choice is yours," she said. "This gift, this sphere, it's not just for you. It's a message, a key. And now you must decide what to do with it. Whether to use it or destroy it." Her words hung in the air, thick with meaning. The protagonist felt his heart racing in his chest. Use it or destroy it? What could this small sphere possibly mean? And why had she chosen him to make this decision? "I don't understand," he admitted, his voice shaky. The alien woman's eyes softened, and for the first time since he had met her, she seemed almost vulnerable. "I cannot stay long," she said, her tone quieter now. "I have to leave. But you have the power to change everything. The fate of many lies in your hands. Do you trust me?" The protagonist took a deep breath, trying to absorb her words. He wanted to understand, to know what was going on, but there were too many unknowns. Was she asking him to trust her, or was she just leading him down a path he couldn't return from? "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I can't ignore this. I can't ignore what you've brought into my life. I need to understand, please." The alien woman studied him for a moment before speaking again. "The time will come when you will understand. But for now, take this." She placed her hand over his, her fingers warm against his skin. "And remember, not all gifts are meant to be kept." With those words, she stepped back and turned, her figure slowly disappearing into the night. The protagonist stood there, still holding the sphere, feeling the weight of her words settle heavily in his chest. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. The protagonist couldn't stop thinking about the alien woman, about her words, and about the choice that lay before him. He had no idea what he was supposed to do with the sphere. It wasn't just an ordinary object, it felt different, as if it held the power to change the world. But how? And why had she chosen him? He was just an ordinary man. He didn't have the answers. The weight of the situation was becoming too much to bear. The sphere pulsed with energy, and the protagonist could feel it in his bones. Every time he touched it, it felt like the world was shifting around him. But what was it? And what was he supposed to do with it? The alien woman had returned to him, but she had left again, leaving him with more questions than answers. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had been given an opportunity, one that could change everything for better or for worse. But the question lingered. Could he trust her? Could he trust this gift? He spent hours sitting in his room, staring at the sphere, contemplating his choices. Should he destroy it? Could he even destroy it? Or should he use it, trusting that the alien woman had come into his life for a reason? The idea of using it felt dangerous, but the possibility of changing everything, of having the power to do something extraordinary, was too tempting to ignore. And then one night, as he sat in silence, a thought crossed his mind. What if he wasn't meant to make the decision alone? What if the choice wasn't just about him? What if it was about something bigger, something beyond his understanding? The alien woman had told him that not all gifts were meant to be kept, but she hadn't said what would happen if he kept it. If he chose to keep it, what would it mean for his life and for the lives of everyone around him? The protagonist stood up, holding the sphere tightly in his hand. He made a decision. The answers weren't going to come easily, and he wasn't going to have all the answers right away. But he knew that this moment would change the course of his life. And maybe, just maybe, the choice he made would be the key to something greater than anything he had ever imagined.